Welcome back to the deep dive. Right now, millions of people, maybe even you listening to this right now, are paying something like $40 a month for a little plastic bottle filled with freeze-dried bacteria.
Yeah, those probiotics.
Right. We keep these expensive capsules in our refrigerators, we swallow them with our morning coffee, and we just kind of, accept it as a normal modern ritual for staying healthy.
It's totally normalized. I mean, if you care about your gut health today, you take a probiotic. We view it as this completely necessary supplement to just survive modern life.
But the wild thing we're unpacking today is that you are only paying for that little plastic bottle because of a sweeping regulatory shift that happened in 1987.
Right.
A shift that essentially mandated the mass sterilization of the American food supply. Like with the stroke of a pen, the government made it effectively illegal to sell the real naturally living version of that bacteria across state lines.
It really was a monumental pivot in how we interact with nature. Basically, everything commercially available had to be pasteurized. Everything had to be dead.
And that brings us to the focus of today's deep dive. We are looking at this incredible piece of research titled Nature's Lost Vault: The Ancient Science of Fermentation.
Such a fascinating source.
It really is. And our mission today is to uncover how humanity's absolute oldest survival tool was just systematically erased from our daily lives. We're going to explore how it was replaced by a $72 billion global supplement industry, and most importantly, why our own biological machinery is paying a really steep price for that swap.
It's a narrative that bridges, ancient archaeology, microbiology, and frankly, industrial economics. Once you see the mechanism behind it, it completely reframes how you look at the food on your plate.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can really understand why we are currently so reliant on these expensive pills, we need to take a step back. We need to look at what we actually gave up, because we aren't just talking about a recipe here.
No, definitely not.
We are talking about a massive global system of human survival.
Yeah, system is the perfect way to frame it. This wasn't a localized culinary trend. It was a globally applied, highly engineered biological tool.
Right. I was looking at the archaeological timeline in the source, and it goes back so much further than I thought. Like, picture a cave in northern Israel, right? A Natufian burial site.
Oh, the 2018 discovery.
Exactly. Researchers found the chemical residue of fermented grain inside these heavy stone mortars. They were brewing a form of beer 13,000 years ago.
13,000. It's staggering.
And not for a party, but for preserved nourishment. And then, you jump across the world to Sweden during the Mesolithic period.
The Swedish discovery is just incredible. 9,600 years ago, they were building these structured underground gutters.
Wait, gutters like in the ground?
Yeah, it's specifically designed to ferment fish, huge quantities of it. And we see this deployed constantly for military logistics too. Like when Roman legions were marching across Gaul and North Africa, they obviously didn't have refrigeration.
Right, obviously.
So they carried heavy barrels of fermented cabbage with them. It literally kept the armies alive when the most common alternative was falling to dysentery.
Wow. I was reading the notes on Captain James Cook's Second Pacific Voyage, and the sheer volume of fermented food he relied on is just staggering.
Oh yeah, the sauerkraut. He loaded, I think, 7,860 pounds of it into the hold of his ship in 1772.
7,000 pounds?
Yeah, and they were at sea for 3 years, literally circling Antarctica and crossing the entire Pacific Ocean. He didn't lose a single man to scurvy.
That's amazing.
The Royal Society actually awarded him a medal for that logistical feat. And over in Korea, there are documented records of 40 generations of families who have maintained the exact same kimchi cultures without interruption.
40 generations?
Yeah, the exact same bacterial lineage, just passed hand to hand across centuries.
It feels like this incredible example of parallel evolution. Like, how completely different, disconnected civilizations independently invented the wheel because the physics of a circle just work?
Right.
This is like the biological equivalent of inventing the wheel, but for food preservation. Every culture, every continent, just reaching the exact same microscopic discovery entirely independently.
What's fascinating here is the precise biological mechanism they all tapped into. Because, as you said, this wasn't just some lucky accident. They observed an invisible system and they harnessed it.
Yeah.
The mechanism is elegantly simple, really. You take vegetables, you submerge them in water or brine to completely exclude oxygen, and you wait.
But hold on, if I just leave a cabbage in a bowl of water on my counter, it turns to mush. It just rots. Why doesn't the submerged vegetable just rot?
Well, that is where the biological warfare comes in. There's a specific family of bacteria called lactobacillus.
Okay.
And here is the crucial detail. These lactic acid bacteria already live naturally on the surface of every single leaf, every grain, every vegetable you have ever touched in your life.
Wait, really? They're already on there?
Exactly. You don't have to go find them or add them. When you create that oxygen-free environment by submerging the vegetable, the lactobacillus wakes up and takes over. They start consuming the natural sugars in the plant, and as a byproduct, they produce lactic acid.
So they are basically digesting the plant sugars and sweating out acid.
Sweating out acid, that's a great way to visualize it.
Yeah.
And as they pump out that lactic acid, the pH of the entire environment inside that jar drops significantly.
It gets super acidic.
Highly acidic.
Now, the dangerous pathogens, the things that cause food to rot, or the bacteria that give us dysentery or botulism, they simply cannot survive in an acid bath.
Ah, I see.
So humanity figured out how to preserve food, not by using heat or harsh chemicals to kill everything, which is, our modern approach, but by selectively choosing exactly what lives.
We basically harnessed a microscopic workforce to build a defensive wall around our food.
Precisely.
But if ancient armies and sailors were essentially using this as biological armor, how did we get from Roman legions eating cabbage to modern doctors realizing this was actual medicine? Well, that major shift in scientific understanding starts in Paris in 1904 with a Russian-born zoologist named Elie Metchnikoff.
Okay, 1904.
He was standing before the very prestigious Pasteur Institute, presenting some highly unusual demographic data he had gathered from rural Bulgaria.
What was so special about rural Bulgaria at the time?
He noticed a glaring anomaly in their life expectancy. People in these specific rural villages were living to be 87 years old.
Wow.
And to put that in context, this is an era when the vast majority of Europeans were dying before they hit 60.
Wait, nearly a 30-year difference in life expectancy just isolated to these specific villages?
Yes. And their diet was incredibly heavy in traditional living fermented dairy. We're talking fresh yogurt, kefir, cultured buttermilk, all made daily.
Oh, wow.
Metchnikoff proposed a radical new theory. He said the human gut is an active battleground between beneficial and toxic microbes, and these living fermented foods were the weapons winning that battle.
So it wasn't just food to them.
Right. He argued that eating a jar of living yogurt wasn't just breakfast. It was a daily act of biological maintenance that actively prolonged human life.
And he won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1908 for his work on immunity, largely tied to these concepts, right? But he didn't stay a hero for long, did he?
He did not. Within a decade of his Nobel Prize, mainstream science completely turned on him.
Why?
The prevailing medical argument became that these delicate bacteria simply could not survive the harsh, acidic environment of the human digestive system.
Oh, because of stomach acid.
Exactly. The consensus was that stomach acid would incinerate the bacteria long before they ever reached the intestines. So Metchnikoff was discredited, his research was shelved, and the idea of therapeutic fermentation was basically abandoned by Western medicine.
Which brings us all the way to July of 2021. A team at Stanford University, led by a researcher named Justin Sonnenberg, runs a clinical trial that completely blows the dust off Metchnikoff's theories.
Yeah, the parameters of this modern study are incredibly telling. They took 36 healthy adults and monitored them intensely for 10 weeks.
Okay.
They split them into two groups. One group was assigned a high-fermented food diet. They were tasked with eating 6 servings a day of yogurt, kefir, kimchi, fermented cottage cheese, and vegetable brine drinks.
Hold on, I need to make sure I'm getting this. 6 servings a day. How does someone even do that? What does a vegetable brine drink even look like?
It sounds intense, I know. But a vegetable brine drink is essentially just drinking the liquid left over from your sauerkraut or your kimchi.
Oh, okay. Just taking a shot of the juice.
Right. But you're right. 6 servings a day is a massive, deliberate dietary shift. Now, the second group, the control group, was asked to triple their daily fiber intake.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you read any modern health blog or talk to almost any doctor today, we are relentlessly told that fiber is the undisputed key to gut health, right? Like fiber is the holy grail.
Absolutely. That's the standard advice.
But the results of the Stanford study completely disrupt that narrative. The group that tripled their fiber saw absolutely no increase in their microbiome diversity. And they saw 0 decrease in their inflammation levels.
Which is a stunning result that runs counter to almost all conventional modern dietary advice.
Right. And the underlying reason is fascinating. The high-fiber group's gut bacteria had been so thoroughly depleted by a lifetime of eating the standard sterilized industrial diet that they simply didn't have the biological equipment left to break down the fiber.
Yeah.
All that extra healthy fiber was just passing right through them untouched.
It's like sending lumber to a construction site where all the carpenters have quit. I mean, the material is useless without the workforce.
That's a perfect way to put it.
For the group eating the 6 servings of fermented foods, however, the clinical outcomes were night and day. Every single participant in the fermented group showed a massive increase in microbiome diversity.
Every single one.
Every single one. But more importantly, from a medical standpoint, they showed a documented decrease in 19 different inflammatory markers.
19 different markers dropping just from eating cabbage and yogurt.
Yes. And one of the most critical markers that plummeted was interleukin-6. This is a specific protein heavily linked to type 2 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and chronic stress. It went down across the board.
That is just incredible.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Elie Metchnikoff, standing in Paris in 1904, wasn't a quack. He wasn't wrong. He was just 114 years early.
Wow.
He observed the clinical outcome of a long life long before we had the molecular tools to prove exactly how the mechanism worked.
But if the science is this undeniable, if it lowers inflammation, increases gut diversity, and literally won a Nobel Prize a century ago, how on earth did we go from that to it being heavily regulated and effectively banned from interstate commerce by the 1980s? Like, how do you outlaw a foundational biological process?
To understand that, we have to move from the clean laboratories of Stanford back into the incredibly grim industrial slums of the 1850s.
Okay, setting the scene.
It's a dark chapter, but it is the exact moment our food system was fundamentally altered. During the 1850s, American cities were exploding in population, growing much faster than the surrounding agricultural infrastructure could handle.
They needed milk for all these people fast.
Exactly. So you have these dense urban dairies operating right inside the city limits, right next to the factories. And to cut costs, these dairies were feeding their cows toxic, fermenting grain waste that they bought for pennies from adjacent alcohol distilleries.
Oh, that sounds awful.
They literally called it slop. The conditions were horrific. You have sick, malnourished cows living in absolute filth, being fed toxic distillery waste.
Yeah.
Naturally, the milk they produced was heavily contaminated with deadly pathogens. It became a direct vector for typhoid, tuberculosis, and scarlet fever. The infant mortality rate in these urban slums hit an absolute crisis point of 20%.
Wait, 1 in 5 babies?
Yeah.
Dying largely because of contaminated city milk.
Yes. It was an acute, terrifying public health crisis.
So obviously something massive had to be done. But I mean, if the problem is sick cows eating toxic waste in a slum, the logical solution would be to get the cows out of the city, stop feeding them slop, and clean up the agriculture, right?
That would be the logical root cause solution, yes. But cleaning up the agriculture would have empowered small, independent farmers and decentralized the food supply.
Right.
Instead, powerful industrialists backed a campaign to simply boil the problem away through mandatory pasteurization.
And the regulatory history here is wild. The first mandatory pasteurization law was passed in Chicago in 1909, and it was introduced by men who had direct financial ties to John D. Rockefeller, who held major investments in massive corporate dairy operations like Borden's Condensed Milk, Sheffield Farms, and Armour.
Right, because pasteurization required incredibly expensive, heavy sterilization equipment that only the largest corporate operations could afford to buy and run.
So it was a massive barrier to entry. Exactly. The small, independent farmers who were pasture-raising healthy cows and selling raw living milk directly to families simply could not comply with the new capital requirements. They were regulated entirely out of existence.
It was a domino effect. Like Illinois mandated statewide pasteurization in 1909. New York followed in 1910. The U.S. Public Health Service recommended it nationally in 1912.
Yep.
And all of this culminates in that date we mentioned at the very beginning of the deep dive, August 10th, 1987. That is when the FDA published the final Regulation 21 CFR Part 1, 240.61, which completely banned all raw dairy from interstate commerce.
The official government stance became that raw living milk, no matter how carefully and cleanly produced, may be unsafe.
So what does this all mean? Because I have to play devil's advocate here for you listening. Given that terrifying 20% infant mortality rate in the 1850s, wasn't boiling the milk objectively a good thing for public health at the time? I mean, it stopped the tuberculosis and the typhoid dead in its tracks. It is a crucial tension to look at objectively. Yes, Boiling the milk absolutely killed the immediate pathogens that were breeding in those toxic urban slums. It stopped the acute crisis and saved lives in that specific context.
Right.
However, by legally mandating that all milk, and eventually heavily processing almost all commercial food, must be treated this way, we instituted a sweeping policy of mass sterilization.
We sterilized everything.
We turned the entire American food supply into what researchers call a sterile wasteland. We threw the baby out with the bathwater, destroying the vital beneficial lactobacillus right along with the typhoid.
Wow.
This raises an important question. If we systematically eradicated our primary source of daily living bacterial maintenance through these sweeping laws, what stepped into the vacuum?
Well, the vacuum is exactly why you might be standing in a pharmacy aisle today trying to decipher the label on a $40 bottle of probiotics. We replaced the farm with the factory. By 2024, the global probiotics market was valued at $72 billion.
And if you look at the label on those expensive capsules, what are they actually selling you? It's lactobacillus and bifidobacterium.
Yeah.
The exact same microscopic organisms that grow absolutely free in a simple jar of cabbage and brine.
But there's a massive biological problem with these expensive pills, a problem the supplement industry cannot easily solve. When you swallow a freeze-dried probiotic capsule, those naked bacteria have to run a biological gauntlet.
Oh, absolutely.
They have to survive your highly acidic stomach acid, they have to survive your bile salts, and they have to fight the competitive pressure of whatever is already living in your gut.
The attrition rate is severe. The metric used to measure this is CFUs, or colony-forming units.
Right.
These CFU counts begin declining the moment they leave the factory floor. A massive percentage of them die in transit, on the shelf, and especially in the harsh environment of your stomach, long before they ever reach your lower intestine where they are actually needed.
I was looking at the numbers for the ancient alternative. Yeah. Just 1 single tablespoon of properly fermented, unpasteurized sauerkraut contains approximately 10 billion live colony-forming units of lactobacillus.
That's huge.
10 billion in 1 spoonful. That is equal to an entire bottle of the most expensive supplement on the shelf.
And the reason it's so much more effective isn't just the sheer volume of bacteria, but how they are delivered into the body.
Right, because instead of sending these naked, freeze-dried bacteria into a vat of stomach acid, the physical structure of the cabbage acts like a microscopic Trojan horse. It smuggles them safely through the acid bath directly into the intestines.
That natural food matrix, as it's called, is the critical difference. The bacteria are physically embedded in the fiber of the cabbage, which buffers them against your stomach acid, ensuring that a vastly higher percentage of them survive the journey alive.
Mechnikov's rural Bulgarians weren't popping freeze-dried capsules. They were eating living food every single day. We're talking about continuous daily biological maintenance instead of a $40 monthly subscription. And, I kept waiting for the complicated part of the process, but the recipe your great-grandmother would have used is almost comically simple. You take 1 head of cabbage, you weigh it, and you add exactly 2% of that weight in salt.
That specific 2% ratio is the crucial scientific component of the entire process.
Wait, why exactly 2%? What is that specific amount of salt actually doing?
Well, it comes down to an evolutionary concept called halotolerance. Essentially salt tolerance.
Okay.
Over millions of years, lactic acid bacteria evolved a unique cellular defense mechanism that allows them to thrive in salty environments. The bacteria that cause food to rot, however, never developed that defense.
Oh, that's clever.
Right. When you apply 2% salt ratio, the rotting bacteria essentially shrivel up and die from the osmotic pressure. But the lactobacillus, they're perfectly comfortable. They thrive.
So you shred the cabbage, you massage that 2% salt into the leaves until the salt breaks down the cell walls and the cabbage starts releasing its own natural water.
Yeah.
Then you just pack it tightly into a glass jar, pressing it down until that natural brine rises up and completely submerges the leaves. You leave it sitting on your counter at room temperature for 3 to 4 weeks. That's it.
There are no specialized starter cultures to buy online. There is no expensive factory sterilization equipment needed. You are merely selecting the environment. You are creating the microscopic arena where lactobacillus naturally wins the battle and everything else perishes.
I just want to pause on the economics of this for a second. Think about it. A head of cabbage costs maybe $1. The salt costs literal pennies.
Yeah.
What stands out to you about how simple this is? Because for me, it's the realization that for $1 and some change, In 3 weeks, you can generate more bioavailable medicine on your kitchen counter than an entire pharmacy shelf.
It shifts the power dynamic of health completely back to the individual. That bubbling jar sitting on your kitchen counter isn't some primitive culinary trend. It is the highly refined product of 13 millennia of human observation. It's a biological system that was carried across every ocean that kept people alive through wars, famines, and long winters.
It's incredible. We started this deep dive looking at a cave in Israel 13,000 years ago, and we've ended up with a $1 head of cabbage sitting in your modern kitchen.
Full circle.
The through line here is undeniable. We didn't actually lose this knowledge. We didn't forget how to do this. We were systematically told to stop using it by an industrial machine that wanted to sell us a sterilized, packaged alternative.
But telling a living culture to stop growing is not the same as killing it. The lactobacillus are still there. They are on every single leaf in the produce aisle, just waiting for the right conditions.
You don't need a $72 billion industry. You don't need a prescription to fix your gut. And you certainly don't need permission. You just need a cabbage, some salt, and the memory of a biological system that kept your ancestors alive.
It is a profound realization about what we have traded away for modern convenience.
It really is. And it leaves me with one final thought, something I really want you to mull over after we wrap up today. If we spent the entire last century replacing humanity's oldest, most highly efficient biological preservation system with an expensive, deeply inferior industrial substitute, what other natural technologies in our daily lives have we completely abandoned simply because an industry convinced us their sterilized, packaged version was somehow better?
That is an excellent question to chew on.
Think about that the next time you open your fridge and look at that $40 plastic bottle of pills. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.